On the very first day after I died, my boyfriend brought another woman home. They kissed each other openly on the sofa I had bought, ate the celery dumplings I had made with my own hands, and played with the game console I gave him. One day, she asked with curiosity, "Where's Anna?" My boyfriend answered calmly, "We had a fight a few days ago, and she applied for a business trip through the company." Oh, he still doesn't know that I'm already dead. Chapter 1. On Dominic's birthday, I was rushing back when I had a car accident and died instantly. My soul drifts above, yearning to see Dominic one last time. I happened to see Dominic bringing his true love, Ophelia, back to our home. Beneath the dim light, Ophelia's pale face flushed with a rosy glow, as if deeply intoxicated, hanging limply against Dominic. Domi. Dominic steadily held her waist, gently brushing aside her tangled hair, patiently answering her every word. Usually cold and distant, Dominic showed this kind of tenderness only when he was with her. Seeing that scene, even though I was prepared, my heart still ached sharply. Since hearing about Ophelia's divorce, Dominic has seemed distant, coming home less and less, growing colder toward me. I discovered that Ophelia's ex-husband's company went bankrupt, and he fled with the money. It was only after her divorce that Ophelia found out she was pregnant. Debt collectors came every day, terrifying her so much she nearly miscarried several times. Lately, Dominic has been staying at the hospital with her. I argued with Dominic because he wanted to bring Ophelia home to care for her. Ophelia's parents once helped me financially. I can't just turn my back on her. The corners of my eyes reddened. Is it really just because of this? Dominic was silent for a moment, then suddenly stubbed out his cigarette. "I told you I would marry you, Anna. What exactly are you so uneasy about? What am I really uneasy about?" In truth, Dominic knew perfectly well, but he chose to pretend otherwise. That night, I suddenly lost control of my emotions and, for the first time, brought up breaking up with him. Dominic's expression darkened even further. Without a word, he pulled me into the bathroom and turned on the shower. "Do you even realize what you just said?" I trembled, wrapping my arms around myself. His tall shadow pressed close. He tore the buttons from my shirt and bit my lips, almost as if punishing me. "Anna, never bring up breaking up with me." Cold water poured over my head. A burning, scorching heat rolled down my neck, and the face before me blurred into indistinction. "Ophelia is only staying temporarily. Once the police find her ex-husband, I'll send her back," he whispered close to my earlobe. "There's truly no chance between her and me anymore." I struggled, gasping for breath, eyes closed as I threatened, "If you want me to agree, it would have to be after I'm dead." And then, I really died. Dominic really did bring Ophelia back. Chapter 2. I watched Dominic gently lay the drunken Ophelia on the sofa and wipe her face with a warm towel. "You're pregnant. You shouldn't have drunk so much." His voice was low but tender, just like when he used to gently scold her for not paying attention in class. Ophelia seemed unaware, mumbling about a headache. Dominic smiled softly, helped her sit up, then placed his long fingers on her forehead, pressing gently from her brow down behind her ear to her temple. It was such a tender moment that my heart clenched, as if it had stopped beating for a few seconds before fluttering back to life. For a brief moment, I was lost in a daze. I had just graduated from university then. Dominic's grandmother passed away, and Ophelia's parents, disapproving of their relationship because of Dominic's family background, forced Ophelia into blind dates and eventually into marriage with someone else. Those 6 months were dark and bleak, and I stayed by Dominic's side, enduring it little by little. After half a year, he finally accepted my confession. Later on, he decided to start his own business and often went out for social drinking. I helped him wipe his face just like that, cooked hangover soup for him, and took care of him through the night. The next day, my eyes were bruised and my exhaustion was obvious. Dominic looked at me for a long time, sighed, and let me lie on his lap while he massaged me. I was somewhat flattered, and the gentle yet firm pressure of his massage felt so comforting that I even threw a little tantrum. "Dominic, you're not allowed to massage anyone else from now on, okay?" I regretted saying that immediately. Just as I was about to make amends, I heard Dominic chuckle softly above me. "Okay." What he said then was, "Okay, but..." Then again, Ophelia can hardly be considered just anyone. I was simply the exception Dominic made, while she had always been his favorite. Chapter 3. Suddenly, I felt I should leave this place. I can't even bear to watch Dominic massage Ophelia. What if one day they rekindle their old feelings? Embrace? Kiss? Even. Just the thought of it sent a sharp pain surging through my chest. A line of ants crawling up my back. I grew restless and bolted toward the door. But the moment I touched the door, a sharp, tearing pain shot through me, worse even than when I'd crashed the car and fallen off the cliff. Breaking apart. I didn't have time to scream before my body was yanked back. After several tries, my face went deathly pale. Cold sweat soaked me through, and I finally understood one thing. I couldn't leave this room. Or rather, I couldn't leave Dominic. Suddenly, all my strength drained away. I stared blankly, watching the two of them. Dominic had just finished massaging Ophelia and was about to leave when a hand slipped around his neck. Ophelia opened her eyes. Their eyes met. "Domi, do you still love me?" Ophelia asked directly. Dominic stared into her eyes. "I hate you." Ophelia turned pale. His palm covered her cheek, his fingertips slowly tracing it, like a sigh. "But I have never forgotten you." I curled my lips in a bitter smile. Ophelia smiled at the corners of her eyes and brows, as if suddenly recalling something, her gaze flickering. "And Anna? She was with you for 5 years. What do you feel for her?" Dominic froze, parted his lips, but said nothing. The atmosphere suddenly grew quiet. Ophelia's expression shifted slightly, her probing gaze fixed on him. In the next moment, she tilted her head up gently and kissed the corner of his mouth. Dominic's body tensed noticeably, but only briefly. He quickly took the lead, his large hand sliding around her waist to pull her onto his lap, fingers curling into the back of her head, deepening the kiss. A sudden wave of nausea swept over me. I covered my lips, afraid the turmoil in my stomach would soon rise to my chest. "Domi, he's already left me behind. Please don't leave me too. I don't want to be alone." Ophelia breathed softly, pressing her lips to his in a quiet plea. "I know you feel only gratitude and guilt toward her. The one you truly love is me." Ophelia's kiss fell on his collarbone, pausing briefly before she reached to undo the buttons of his shirt. Dominic suddenly pressed his hand firmly over hers. "No." His voice was cold and low, his eyes just as icy. A chill emanated from him, slowly spreading, making even my soulless self, incapable of feeling warmth, shiver. Ophelia stared at him, stunned, as if she hadn't expected to be rejected. "It's because of Anna that you..." I too stared at him, my heart pounding wildly and out of control. Dominic was silent for a moment, lowering his gaze, his expression unreadable. "Ophelia, I have a girlfriend now. This isn't good for you." Ophelia understood, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I'll wait for you." I understood too, letting out a bitter laugh. Dominic meant that before we officially broke up, he and Ophelia wouldn't cross any real lines. It wasn't about his character, nor respect for me as his official girlfriend. He simply didn't want Ophelia to carry any stain or moral blame. He truly cherished and cared for her. Smiling, tears began to fall in heavy drops. Chapter 4. After putting Ophelia to sleep, Dominic stood alone on the balcony, smoking, tall and graceful. Her figure almost seemed to dissolve into the night, with only the crimson at her fingertips catching the light. His face was nearly expressionless, his fingertips repeatedly tracing the cigarette, an unmistakable sign of his agitation. I hovered less than 2 meters away, watching him with a cold detachment. They had already confessed their feelings to each other, so I couldn't understand what he was still so restless about. "Oh, we haven't broken up yet. Probably because of what just happened, he's feeling unsatisfied." That's what I thought. Then, suddenly, his phone rang. Dominic almost immediately unlocked his phone, his unusually dark eyes fixed intently on the screen. In the next moment, a flicker of disappointment crossed his eyes. I suddenly felt restless and drifted behind him, openly peeking at the screen. What I saw left me momentarily stunned. Dominic had opened the WeChat chat window with me. Since that big fight, we hadn't spoken at all. The last message was one I sent him. "Domi comrade's birthday is coming up in 7 days. What gift do you want?" That day, maybe he was too busy with work, or perhaps caring for Ophelia at the hospital. But he didn't reply. Now, Dominic absent-mindedly swiped his finger up and down, refreshing WeChat, as if that might bring a message through. I didn't quite know how to respond, lost in thought. Dominic had already sent a message. Dominic, it's 11:30. In that moment, I understood what he meant. It was 11:30 at night. His birthday was nearly over. For 5 years. I never missed his birthday, always cooking longevity noodles and celery dumplings for him. This year, I hadn't even wished him happy birthday. But I never would again. I will never say it again. Not ever. Because I'm already dead. Chapter 5. Dominic stood on the balcony for a full half hour. And when he finally came back to the living room, chilled to the bone, his face was drawn and grim. He stared at the phone screen for a couple more seconds. Then, irritated, tossed it onto the sofa. With long strides, he reached into the refrigerator and pulled out a bag of celery dumplings, the ones I had made last time but hadn't finished. Purposely frozen, without expression, he thawed the dumplings, cooked them, then sat at the dining table, head bowed, eating each bite with quiet focus. The pale smoke drifted up over my brow, making me seem colder, more distant. Watching him quietly eat dumplings, a thought suddenly came to me. Dominic probably cares about me. In some way. I was surprised. Then it all became clear. Strictly speaking, today isn't really Dominic's birthday. Dominic's actual birthday was a week ago. But 5 years ago on that day, Dominic's grandmother passed away. Ophelia left him, and Dominic decided he no longer wanted to celebrate birthdays. It was my idea to move his birthday to a week later, and every time, I was the only one eager, fussing over making it special for him. I'm an orphan, back at the orphanage. My birthday was the happiest day of the entire year. I just wanted to make him a little happier, too. The first time I helped him celebrate his birthday, I secretly spent months learning the game he loved. I planned to stay up all night playing through it with him, but by 2 a.m., I'd fallen asleep with my head resting on his thigh. When I woke and opened my eyes, Dominic was standing over me, arms crossed, his cool brows slightly raised, a half-smile playing on his lips as he looked down. All night? He asked. The second time, I prepared a big spread and cut several of my fingers while cooking. In the end, only the longevity noodles and celery dumplings were actually edible. Dominic actually finished all the food, but usually taciturn. He surprisingly praised the dumplings several times. I have always liked climbing up the pole, straightening my chest. You have a weak heart. Eating celery-filled dumplings can lower blood pressure and heart rate. So I took the shape and cooking taste very seriously. At that time Dominic looked at me for a long time. Anna, why are you so good to me? I smiled. Because I like you. I really like you. Before I could continue confessing, Dominic cupped my chin and leaned in to kiss me. Dominic always kept his emotions hidden, so it was the first time I truly felt such an open, burning passion from him. Then we rolled onto the bed. That night, we were both so inexperienced, gently exploring one another. But later, as if he'd learned instinctively, he gripped my waist, his dark, deep eyes reflecting my tear-streaked face. Silence stretched fiercely and unyieldingly until the late hours of the night. It turned out that being shameless was quite effective. By the third or fourth time I helped him celebrate his birthday, Dominic simply accepted it as normal. I suppose that these 5 years of heartfelt devotion and daily closeness have still left a faint mark on his heart. Chapter 6. The sharp ding-dong sound pulled me back from my drifting thoughts. Dominic seemed lost in thought too, not even noticing the spoon as it slipped to the floor. I bent down instinctively to pick it up, but my incorporeal hand passed right through the spoon, and I froze for a moment. Then another hand reached down and picked it up. What are you eating? Ophelia's soft voice echoed through the room. I opened my palm, gazing at these hands that were growing ever more blurred, barely able to hold their shape. Then at Ophelia's slender, pale hands. Suddenly, I felt a pang of insecurity. Ming Ming, before I died, my hands were beautiful too. Now I can cook a whole table of delicious dishes and breeze through games effortlessly. But now I can't even touch them. What flavor are these dumplings? They smell so strange. Ophelia took another spoon and slowly stirred the dumplings in Dominic's bowl. Dominic frowned slightly but still replied, Celery. Ophelia nodded absent-mindedly, tilting her face up to look at Dominic. Anna, why did you say today is your birthday? Dominic paused, caught off guard. Ophelia smiled frankly. Your phone was just on the sofa, so I took a look at your chat history. Then she added, I never expected your lock screen password to have stayed the same all this time. 0802. The day we first met. Dominic lowered his head. I couldn't discern the feelings in his eyes. My heart still ached. Just a little. I used to tease Dominic into changing the lock screen password to the day we became a couple, but he always refused. So, it was because of her. Answer me, why did Anna say today is your birthday? I stared coldly at Ophelia. Dominic had promised me before that this was a secret just between the two of us, that he wouldn't tell anyone. That day, 5 years ago, so many terrible things happened. She said she'd postpone my birthday by a week, finding all sorts of ways to celebrate it for me. That familiar voice was as low and clear as ever. I bit down hard on my tongue, a metallic sweetness quietly rising, surging and spreading all around. Suddenly, I felt like laughing at myself. Ophelia was silent for a moment. She really was good to you. Did she make these dumplings too? Just for your birthday? You coaxed me to sleep just to eat this? To keep your promise to her? Dominic didn't answer. The atmosphere fell into a heavy silence. Ophelia quickly scooped up a dumpling and suddenly said, I want to eat. No. I screamed hoarsely, but no one could hear me. I reached out to snatch her spoon, but I couldn't reach it. Dominic's eyes darkened as he gripped her wrist, whispering a warning. Ophelia. Ophelia locked eyes with him, repeating slowly and deliberately, I want to eat. Domi, from now on, I'll be with you for every birthday. She was pushing him to make a choice. Dominic's jaw clenched, a flicker of struggle flashing in his dark eyes. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly let go of Ophelia's hand. Ophelia finally got to eat the dumplings she wanted. I stared blankly, tears streaming endlessly from the corners of my eyes. It felt like countless blades were slicing through my heart, tearing flesh and blood, leaving it raw and bleeding. These aren't just dumplings. These aren't just dumplings. For the past few days, I've been drifting in the corner, watching them with a detached heart, as if all my emotions have slipped away. But maybe it's just my imagination. After that day, Dominic has grown noticeably colder toward Ophelia. Besides playing games together, he and Ophelia share no other closeness. He even seems to avoid her touch on purpose. One day, Ophelia suddenly asked, I've been meaning to ask, what about Anna? Dominic hesitated briefly, then said calmly, she had a fight with me a few days ago and asked the company for a business trip. Ophelia laughed. After all these days without contact, maybe she's already thinking of breaking up with you. Dominic's eyes darkened, his voice firm. Impossible. He said this as he instinctively pulled out his phone, staring at our chat screen, a rare flicker of unease and restlessness crossing his brow. Oh, he still doesn't know that I'm already dead. Suddenly, I found myself curious about how he would react once he knew. Chapter 7. The next day, Dominic received the ring I had sent him, the engagement ring he had given me. A month ago, Dominic and I went out to dinner. Halfway through the meal, the man sitting across suddenly stood up, unexpectedly pulled out a ring, and dropped to one knee. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, noble and handsome, as if meticulously dressed, yet his knuckles turned pale from nervousness. The crowd was cheering, and he smiled softly, his eyes burning as he looked at me. Anna, marry me. My eyes were swollen from crying, and I trembled as I reached out my hand, letting him slip the ring onto my ring finger. That night, I was unusually passionate, holding his head in my hands, watching the broken shadows of the flickering light above us sway throughout the night. I was an orphan after being adopted by my foster parents. They had a son the very next year. After a few years, they came up with some excuse and sent me back again. What excuse was it? It seemed to be something about liking to steal. If starving to the point of desperation and eating my little brother's leftover chicken drumstick counts as stealing. Probably because of that. When the class fund went missing at school and someone suspected me, Dominic stood up to defend me, and in that moment, he took up residence deep in my heart. Later, I was adopted by a couple who weren't well off. They treated me kindly, but I remained cautious, keeping to myself. At that age, still growing, I only dared to serve myself half a bowl at meals. By the time I finally opened my heart, they had already died in a car accident on their way to a parent-teacher meeting for me. I ended up back at the orphanage. No one wanted to adopt me anymore. My name is Anna, but I've never truly found a place to call home. I longed so much for a real family. Now, Dominic has proposed to me. I thought, finally, I would have a family. But Ophelia came back. She wasn't doing well, and the first person she thought to turn to wasn't her parents, but Dominic. And my boyfriend, my fiancé, did his duty, helping her, even wanting to bring her home to care for her. After that bitter fallout, I asked the company for a business trip and went to City S. After a week of thought, I sent the engagement ring back by courier. I want to break up with him. It was today that Dominic received that ring. The moment he saw the ring, his face darkened as if it could drip water, and his eyes seemed glazed with an unmelting layer of ice. He kept sending me messages, calling me, demanding to know what I meant, smoking cigarette after cigarette. His features grew colder and harder, the anxiety etched between his brows threatening to spill over. From that side, the message tone kept sounding, but the calls never connected. After who knows how many cigarettes were smoked, once the pack was empty and there were no more, he finally lowered his eyelids, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna, are you really going to leave me? Yes, I've already left, completely, utterly left. You can finally be with Ophelia, just as you wished, I replied softly, even though he couldn't hear me. Suddenly, something occurred to me. I've always thought of myself as decisive, since I'd already returned the ring and decided to break up. Why did I still rush back to help him celebrate his birthday? I try hard to remember, but I can't shake the feeling that I've forgotten something important. Chapter 8. I noticed that Dominic has been zoning out for longer stretches. That evening, he was working in the study when Ophelia thoughtfully brought him coffee. Without looking up, Dominic blurted out, Anna, it's too late now. You should go rest. Ophelia stared at him, stunned. Dominic was caught off guard too. He muttered a quiet sorry, then rubbed his forehead, as if trying to conceal something. After that, he seemed lost in thought, staring at that page of the plan without turning it, ignoring the displeased look on Ophelia's face beside him. The next day, Ophelia went to Dominic's bedroom to clean, whether it was a test or just careless. She quietly gathered up the things that belonged to me, and even accidentally scattered the Lego we had built together. When Dominic saw it, he rarely showed her such a cold look. Don't touch these. Then he shrugged off her hand and, piece by piece, carefully began to reassemble the scattered blocks. He spent as long rebuilding as Ophelia stood silently watching beside him. While he was with Ophelia, Dominic often seemed distracted. I find myself distracted by the sunflowers I planted on the balcony, by the clothes I bought for him in the wardrobe, by the little goldfish I raised in the fish tank. Even when he chats with Ophelia and occasionally mentions my name, he suddenly freezes. I float in midair, quietly watching Ophelia's face grow paler and paler. It's not just Ophelia, I realize it too. Dominic seems to be slowly coming to understand his own feelings. I squint, staring at the man on the sofa whom I have loved all my life. He seemed a little drunk, his brows knitted together, a flush rising on his handsome face. He was on the phone with his friend, Jason. So, do you want Anna or Ophelia? Jason asked. He was silent for a moment. Anna has already broken up with me. So, it's Ophelia, then? He frowned instinctively. The other side seemed to sense something. Dominic, a person's heart is small. Love can only be given to one. Go find Anna. Dominic said nothing, lowered his head, and gently traced the engagement ring with his fingers. For a long while. All right. I watched him in silence. If this had happened before, maybe I would have felt happy seeing this. But now, I'm dead. I'm dead. After all, irritation gnawed at my heart like ants burrowing deeper and deeper, growing more restless by the moment. A strange turmoil churned in my mind, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Chapter 9. Jason asked him to take Ophelia to her parents' house. He agreed, and also bought a plane ticket to the city where I was on a business trip. That day, He seemed intent on talking to Ophelia about it. Just after he got home, Ophelia came out carrying a bowl of soup. Ophelia, who had always seemed untouched by the world, personally prepared a lavish dinner today, even taking the trouble to make fresh celery dumplings. That day, it was my fault. I pressured you to choose. I was just too scared. Scared of losing you. I didn't want to marry either. But my mother threatened to take her own life. During those 5 years married to another, not a single day went by without me thinking of you. She wore my apron, looking at Dominic with a fragile, pleading gaze. Tears flowed in endless streams, her eyes rimmed red, as if brushed with rouge. I know you have her in your heart now, but I can wait for you. Please don't push me away. She wrapped her arms tightly around his waist, burying her face in his chest, clutching his clothes with trembling hands, her voice breaking in a way that was achingly tender. At least stay with me a little longer. When she comes back, I'll leave, okay? Dominic said nothing, but he didn't pull away either. He sighed softly and gently wiped away her tears. Don't cry anymore, it's not good for the baby. He still softened. A dull ache spread from my heart, a sharp bitterness surging wildly through my body. How much must one love someone to be disappointed by them time and time again? Over these 5 years, I poured out every ounce of my passion, devoted myself completely to him, only to barely carve out a place in his heart. But she only cried once, and he gave in. Chapter 10. When Jason learned that Ophelia would be staying a while longer, his expression grew complicated. Aren't you afraid that if Anna finds out, she might really leave you? Ophelia and I are just friends now. Dominic stood unusually straight, his face unreadable. By the time Anna cools off and comes back, Ophelia will already be gone. She'll never know. Jason sighed and fell silent. I watched it all with a blank expression, growing more eager to see how Dominic would react when he learned I was dead. These past few days, Dominic has been keeping Ophelia company as promised. They haven't crossed any lines. Their relationship truly feels like that of ordinary friends. All the while, I've been struggling to remember what I forgot, why I hurried back to celebrate his birthday. There's a quiet premonition stirring inside me once I recall it. My soul will no longer be tethered to Dominic, and I will finally be free. But every time I think back, my head aches as if it's about to burst. Just as I was sinking into despair, Dominic went with Ophelia to the mall. They happened upon some baby products, and Ophelia pulled him inside. Ophelia picked up a princess dress, covering her mouth with a soft smile. I wish so much that I were carrying a daughter, so I could buy her all these beautiful dresses. Domi, do you prefer boys or girls? Ophelia asked, her curiosity clear. Daughters. I think. Dominic's lips curved into a faint smile as his gaze settled on the baby products. In the sunlight, his dark eyes caught a few glimmers of light, softening as he said, Anna likes them. Then he added quietly, no matter what she has, I'll love it. I stood there, stunned. The floodgates of memory burst open. My head throbbed fiercely as countless scenes rushed in like wild horses breaking free. I don't know how long I lay there, motionless on the ground, crying, then laughing, then crying again. I trembled as I placed my hand on my lower abdomen. I remembered. The reason I hurried back to celebrate Dominic's birthday, the reason I wanted to give us another chance, was because I was pregnant. After receiving the diagnosis report, I spent the whole night thinking it over and decided to have a serious talk with Dominic. The night before his birthday, I rushed over. I planned to give him this news as a birthday gift, face to face. In the car, I stroked my belly, imagining what expression Dominic would wear upon hearing the news. Would he laugh out loud? Probably not. He always had that poker face. At most a faint curl of his lips, looking at me seriously and saying, Anna, actually, I'm quite happy that you're pregnant. Does he look forward to this child as much as I do? I think he does. On the night he proposed, he whispered softly in my ear, his breath warm, Anna, after we're married, let's have a child. I've always known you wanted a big family. Yes, I want a big family. How does Dominic understand me so completely? Thinking of that, I couldn't help but laugh. The driver caught the moment in the rearview mirror and asked what I was laughing at. I didn't answer, just smiled and told him to focus on driving. After all, The rain outside was pouring down. Safety first. The journey was a little dull, and I held back the urge to message Dominic directly, instead scrolling through Instagram. Then I noticed someone had followed me. It was Ophelia. I opened Ophelia's Instagram. I saw that all her posts were photos of Dominic. Through her Instagram photos, I watched how, over these days, Dominic had been tenderly by her side in the hospital during her pregnancy, witnessing how their old love slowly reignited. Like a couple who had just welcomed a child and were newlyweds. The injections hurt. But with you here, I'm not afraid anymore. The accompanying image shows Dominic's calm profile and two hands intertwined. After all the twists and turns, you're still the one who treats me best. The accompanying image shows Dominic, who's always been fastidious, bowing his head to peel shrimp for her. Last night, you fell asleep by the bed. I secretly kissed you once. I knew you weren't really asleep. This Instagram post had no photo attached, but Dominic liked it. I stared at the screen, my heart suddenly tightening, feeling as if all the blood was rushing to my head. How much ugliness must one witness in a lifetime? After all, I don't want to watch anymore. And then, fate truly didn't let me see anymore. At the edge of the cliff, a red heavy truck suddenly lost control and barreled straight toward us. We tumbled down the cliff with the vehicle, followed by an explosion. I rushed over, full of hope and joy, but I died carrying only despair and hatred. The intense shock made me temporarily lose that part of my memory, yet the sharp sting of hatred caused my soul to leave my body, lingering by Dominic's side. It turns out I wasn't attached to him because I loved him, but I hate him. When I died, along with the child in my womb, what is Dominic doing? He's taking care of someone else, and someone else's child. Perhaps sensing something, Dominic, who was talking with Ophelia, suddenly furrowed his brow and instinctively glanced around, but saw nothing. Just then, his phone rang. Jason's trembling voice came through the phone. Dominic, I have something to tell you. Please don't get upset. My brother is a traffic cop. There was a serious accident on his end. All the passengers and the driver died. The identity of a pregnant woman was only confirmed today. That pregnant woman is Anna. Chapter 11. I've imagined countless times how Dominic would react when he found out I was dead. Now, I finally see it. He had just been smiling and talking with his true love. When he heard the news, he froze for a moment, his brow knitting tightly. Don't joke about something like that. It's true. Dominic stood stunned for a few seconds before sharply scolding. Jason, don't joke about something like that. A week ago, the taxi she was in collided with a truck, then plunged off a cliff and exploded. Since only a few body parts were found at the scene, and the police hadn't received any missing person report from the pregnant woman's family for an entire week. Over there, Jason choked up, as if he couldn't find the words to continue. It took a full week before the police could confirm Anna's identity through DNA testing. Dominic's face slowly paled, his whole body stiffening as if carved from wood. Dominic, she's pregnant. Did you know about this? She's been missing for a week, and you never tried to find her? With every question from Jason, Dominic's face lost all color, his lips trembling uncontrollably. No, this can't be true. You're lying to me. Domi, Ophelia watched him anxiously from the side, reaching out to gently grasp his hand. On the other end of the line, Jason hesitated, his tone uncertain, neither quite mocking nor scornful. You're with Ophelia now? The air grew still for several seconds. I suppose so. Anna's been missing for a week, and you've been with her all along. Dominic froze for a moment, then almost immediately pulled his hand away from Ophelia's with force. His eyes were rimmed red, his expression uneasy, like a child caught in wrongdoing. Her body is currently at the funeral home. The police have informed her family to come identify her. You should go there later. Jason remained silent for a long while. She has no family, only you. Dominic stood there, dazed, his tall frame suddenly hunched slightly before he slowly crouched down, curling up motionless, murmuring the same phrase over and over. Impossible, impossible. It seemed that was all he could say. He refused to believe that I was truly gone. I watched the scene with cold detachment, strangely relieved. After regaining my memories, I felt that hatred toward him so clearly, it nearly consumed me. But after the brief satisfaction of revenge, An endless fatigue and sorrow settled deep within me. Both love and hate drained so much energy. I lived so exhausted, and even in death, I remained just as weary. Chapter 12. After regaining my memories, I didn't vanish right away. Though my soul had grown a little more transparent, I was still tethered to Dominic's side, only now the space around him had widened slightly. I followed Dominic to the funeral home. This man, who usually kept his emotions tightly sealed, now stood rigid by the door, not daring to come any closer. The staff inside sighed. It's already remarkable to have found so many charred remains. The body is all pieced together. I heard she was pregnant, too. Yes. The wrist and finger joints were severely bent and deformed. She must have been desperately trying to shield the child in her womb. Dominic looked pale, his body trembling slightly. If he hadn't been holding on to the wall, it seemed he would have collapsed at any moment. The staff noticed Dominic and said, "Are you family? Please come this way." Dominic walked over slowly and unsteadily. The two of them left, and the room was left with only him. A tall shadow blocked the light overhead. His back was stiff, and his clenched fists gripped so tightly that his nails bit into his skin without his noticing. He gazed at my body, draped in a white cloth, and began to speak to himself. "On the way here just now, I suddenly remembered something I've never told you." His cool voice trembled slightly, but the inflection was subtle, just as it always was. "We were both so young then. One day, I went downstairs to buy something, and a little boy, playful and mischievous, snatched the spare change from an old blind woman's bowl by the roadside. You suddenly rushed over and wrestled with him. You were so thin and fragile, yet you gripped his hand with such fierce determination. In the end, the boy couldn't bear it any longer and willingly handed you the one yuan he had. I had heard them say before that you were an orphan who liked to steal, but at that moment, your hair was disheveled, the corner of your lips bruised. You lay gasping on the ground for a while, then stood up, placed the money into the blind grandmother's bowl, and quietly walked away. The blind grandmother couldn't see what happened. The little boy couldn't speak, but I saw it all. After that, I couldn't help but start watching you. My eyes always drifted to you without me realizing it. Later, when someone in class falsely accused you of stealing the class fund, my first instinct was to stand up and defend you. I think I will never forget the light in your eyes at that moment. Later, your gaze slowly began to rest on me too. You'd blush when our eyes met, and sometimes you'd just stare at me, lost in thought. In those years, at the school's Outstanding Student Award ceremony, you stood by my side. During basketball games, you handed me water. When I won the sprint championship, you smiled as you presented me with flowers to congratulate me. And in the math Olympiad team, you were there with me as we claimed victory together. And then, Ophelia appeared. He paused, raising his hand to cover his face, as if something was slipping through his fingers. "Anna, I was the one who noticed you first. And you liked me too, so why would I fall for someone else?" I watched him in silence, thinking I had grown indifferent. Yet a quiet, persistent ache still stirred within me. Yes. Why is that? I was the one who knew him first. How did we end up like this? I wasn't naturally lively or cheerful, but when I was with Dominic, I always tried to be like a little son, pouring all my energy into being good to him. I've never been this gentle with anyone before, and I never will be again. Anna, when I proposed to you, I truly meant to spend my life with you. Anna, please pay attention to me. Please, pay attention to me, will you? Anna. Anna. My wife. He called out again and again. No one answered him. He grew restless, even irritable, his lips paling as he called my name over and over until his voice was hoarse, until he could no longer speak. You promised you'd never leave me. His voice was lost and hoarse, as if forced from the depths of his throat. His shoulders shook uncontrollably, his eyes bloodshot, like a desperate beast cornered with no escape, both terrifying and heartbreakingly pitiful. I watched quietly as this man, shattered by grief, struggled to hold himself together. Perhaps it was only now, at this very moment, that he truly understood I was gone. Chapter 13. After receiving my urn, Dominic shut himself away in his room. I felt my spirit growing faint, curling up on the floor in weary sleep. Through the haze, I heard Ophelia knocking insistently on the door, her voice trembling with desperate sobs. Domi, it's been 3 days. Please, just eat something, won't you? Even if she's no longer here, you can't keep neglecting your body like this. If she knew, she would surely be heartbroken. I stirred from a drowsy haze, rubbed my eyes, and instinctively glanced at the tightly closed door. So, 3 days have already passed? An hour later, Jason arrived. He kicked the door open roughly, and the heavy scent of smoke and alcohol immediately spilled out. Blinding light poured into the room, illuminating the man lying on the floor. Scattered around him were cigarette butts, bottles lying askew, and my urn. He sat quietly, focused on piecing together the Lego set we hadn't finished building before, though only a few days had passed. Dominic looked noticeably thinner. A dark stubble shadowed his chin, and his eyes were deeply sunken. Domi, Ophelia's voice was hoarse and fragile. At the sound, he slowly lifted his eyes to meet mine, like a long-forgotten machine, his bloodshot gaze hollow and cold. Why haven't you left yet? He seemed to drift into a daze, whispering, Anna will be back soon. She won't be happy to see you. Ophelia turned pale. He was lost in thought when he suddenly looked up, a flicker of panic crossing his brow. His voice toward Ophelia was cold and merciless. This is the home Anna and I share. You have no right to be here. Ophelia stared at him in disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom him saying such words. Tears falling in heavy streams, Dominic knitted his brows, growing impatient. Get lost. When he remained unmoved, Ophelia flashed a look of shame and ran off, crying. Dominic continued building Lego with a blank expression, seemingly indifferent. If only you had done this sooner, Jason suddenly said. Dominic went pale, his fingers trembling as the building block slipped from his grasp and fell to the floor. He stared blankly at the block, pain and sorrow churning in his eyes. That day, I had a huge fight with her. I told her I wanted to bring Ophelia home to take care of her. If it weren't for that, she wouldn't have applied for the business trip. And she wouldn't have. The day she had the accident, she took a shortcut. She was rushing back, rushing to celebrate my birthday. She wanted to give me the news of her pregnancy as a birthday present. And what was I doing at that moment? Dominic raised his hand to his chest, closing his eyes in pain. I took advantage of her absence to bring Ophelia home. He took a deep breath and began assembling the Lego again, but his fingers trembled, dropping piece after piece. Jason, I regret it. I truly regret it. Jason stood straight, silently watching him, his voice barely above a whisper. They say those who betray true love will sooner or later face their reckoning. But, at the cost of her death, isn't she a little too pitiful? Dominic's eyes were red-rimmed, staring blankly, unable to say a word. Jason sighed deeply. If you keep on like this, she wouldn't want that. Dominic, no matter what, you have to keep living. Chapter 14. A few days later, Dominic insisted on holding a funeral for me. A fine drizzle fell from the sky. Everything was shrouded in gray, and the whole city seemed cloaked in gloom. Dominic stood silently before the tombstone without an umbrella, gazing at my black and white photo. Carved on the tombstone were the words, "Beloved wife Anna." One after another, people laid white chrysanthemums at my grave. After the funeral, Dominic stood still, rain weaving through his hair and leaving streaks down his pale cheeks. Jason brought an umbrella and handed it to him. Do you know your heart isn't well? Any cold could spark an infection. Why do you keep fighting your own body? Dominic threw the umbrella aside without expression. Then let me die of illness. As expected. After that day, Dominic fell seriously ill. It started as a simple cold, but he refused to take any medicine, which led to an infection, and he ended up staying in the hospital for 2 whole weeks. At night, the ward was utterly silent. Dominic gazed blankly out into the quiet darkness beyond the window, and in a soft, almost hesitant voice, he said, Anna, why don't you ever come into my dreams? You once promised to take care of my heart. Now that I've made it sick, won't you come back and see me? After being discharged, just as he was starting to recover, Dominic relapsed into heavy drinking and was rushed back to the ICU with another infection. Jason fixed him with a cold, vacant stare before slapping him hard. If you want to die so badly, you might as well let me do it with this slap. Honestly, when you were doing those disgusting things back then, I wanted to slap you for Anna. You're dead now. Who are you trying to fool with this pathetic act? Are you just trying to move yourself? Let me tell you, if it weren't for your grandmother being so kind to me and asking me to look after you, I wouldn't waste my time on you. If Anna saw your self-righteous behavior, she'd only feel disgusted. Got it? Dominic's face turned pale as he stared at him, dazed. I don't know if Dominic truly heard what Jason said that day, but after that, he no longer fell into despair, nor did he mistreat his body. He went to work with quiet composure and carried on with his life. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was off. At night, he'd stand on the balcony, smoking for a while. The smoke curled slowly, blurring his face, but only deepening the loneliness and chill that surrounded him. When he finished smoking, he'd open the refrigerator and take out that bag of dumplings. There weren't many left, maybe a dozen or so, and Dominic would cook a few each day to eat. Before going to sleep, he would quietly gaze at my urn for a while, softly whispering, "Good night." I realized I no longer needed to follow Dominic everywhere, and my mind was always clouded, inexplicably weary, so I spent my days just lying in my room, sleeping. Lately, he seemed swamped with work and always came home late. I had no idea what kept him busy until Jason called him. "What do you mean by transferring all the company shares to me?" He replied calmly. "I just want to take some time off. I heard you donated a large sum to the orphanage. Was it because of her?" Dominic gave a faint hum. "Just think of it as my way of atoning." Jason was silent for a moment, then changed the subject. Ophelia's ex-husband somehow came back to find her, and they had an argument. He pushed her, and she suffered a miscarriage. Her ex-husband turned himself in at the police station. Ophelia is still unconscious in the hospital. I heard her condition is very serious. She might never be able to have children again. Dominic remained expressionless, as if the whole thing stirred no emotion in him. "I'm going to sleep now. I'll hang up." A few more days passed, and Dominic came home from work, heading to the balcony to smoke as usual. When he returned and saw only a few dumplings left in the refrigerator, he paused briefly, then smiled suddenly. It was a smile of relief, of ease, almost one of quiet happiness. I furrowed my brow slightly. He didn't eat the dumplings right away but went out alone to the mall. He stopped by the baby products section, patiently asking the sales assistant detailed questions, bought some baby items, and then went downstairs to a woman's shop to buy a large bunch of roses. The aunt at the checkout smiled so widely she could barely close her mouth. "Your girlfriend loves buying flowers here the most. By the way, I haven't seen her in a while. Where has she gone?" Dominic stood quietly for a moment. "She went on a business trip." The aunt nodded. "The flowers in the evening aren't very fresh. Come by during the day tomorrow, and I'll give you some." "No, thank you, ma'am." He refused gently but firmly, speaking each word clearly. "Tonight, I'm going on a business trip too." She was taken aback, covering her lips with a teasing smile. "I get it, you're missing your girlfriend, aren't you?" Dominic smiled faintly at the corner of his mouth. His long lashes lowered. "I miss her so much. Really, I miss her terribly." Back at home, Dominic sat quietly at the dining table, carefully finishing the last few dumplings and drinking the broth clean. Then he showered, changed into clean, tidy clothes, placed the rose and baby products on the bed, and stared down at them for a while. After all that, he pulled a fruit knife from the drawer, one he didn't remember putting there, and a bottle of sleeping pills, which he didn't recall buying. He opened the bottle of sleeping pills, poured them all out, then picked them up one by one and swallowed them. My whole body trembled as I fixed him with a fierce gaze. An indescribable fury rose uncontrollably in my chest, grinding inch by inch through my bones and skin, until it swept over my entire body. He actually wanted to end his life. When he picked up the fruit knife, pressed it gently against his wrist, and calmly made a shallow cut, I screamed out loud. "Why?" With a clatter, the fruit knife fell to the floor. "Anna!" Blood kept welling from the wounds on his wrist, the metallic scent spreading. Dominic seemed oblivious, staring at me blankly, lost in a daze. As I thought, when people are near death, they see the ones they long for. "Anna, I miss you so much." I fought to keep my emotions in check. My voice icy cold. But I don't want to see you at all. Dominic's face went pale. He struggled to his feet, picked up the bouquet of roses and the baby clothes from the bed, and forced a smile that was almost pleading. This is a gift for you and the child. His fingers nervously fidgeted with the 2 pieces of clothing, awkwardly lowering his gaze. I didn't know if it was a daughter or a son, so I bought both. I looked at him coldly. Neither of us needs them. He tensed slightly but kept his eyes downcast. I know you're still angry with me for having a child. I shouldn't have argued with you that day. Ophelia was just my youthful stubbornness. The one I've always loved is you. Really. Always. It's been you. Jason said that those who betray true feelings must pay a price. So I came to keep you company. Anna. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Won't you? With every word he spoke, it felt as if a needle pierced my heart, and the tightly wound nerves throughout my body finally snapped. I took a deep breath and suddenly smiled. Do you know what I saw last? The moment of my accident? Dominic looked up, bewildered. I fixed my gaze on his eyes, speaking slowly and deliberately. I saw Ophelia's Instagram. Dominic went pale. I saw how you cared for her so tenderly in the hospital, how you held her hand when she was afraid of the injection, how you carefully peeled shrimp for her, how she tested you with a stolen kiss, and how you liked her Instagram post. I died carrying hatred for you. So, Dominic, how can you even face me and ask for forgiveness? Dominic's figure faltered. His face suddenly drained of all color. He parted his lips but couldn't find the words, his eyes heavy with deep pain and regret. Is this pain enough? Not yet. I forced a faint smile and looked up at him. Dominic, did you enjoy the dumplings you had with Ophelia on your birthday? Dominic blinked in surprise. How did you know? His pupils suddenly dilated, as if he had realized something, a vast wave of fear spreading across his eyes. I met his gaze, my smile growing ever brighter. Because these days, my soul has never left. Dominic, this isn't a hallucination at the moment of your death. I've been watching you all along. Dominic froze completely, as if overwhelmed by a fierce, indescribable, profound despair that swept through his entire being. His lips trembled violently, and his eyes were so red they seemed ready to bleed. I watch you kiss her on the sofa I bought, as if no one else exists. I watch you eat the celery dumplings I made. I watch you share our secrets with her. I watch you play the game console I gave you. I watch you choose her over me. Time and again. Dominic, I died in agony and despair with our child. And you knew nothing. You held Ophelia in your arms, planning how to end things with me and openly be with her. I reveal it all, word by word, raw and bleeding. Inside, it feels like a scream. My eyes sting and ache fiercely, and everything blurs before me. So, Dominic, just because you've finally come to realize your true feelings, you have to hypocritically kill yourself to be with me, to prove your so-called deep love? Why should that be? Dominic was curled up on the ground, clutching his head, his eyes hollow, tears of blood actually streaming down his face. Warm, fresh blood ran down his nose and chin, dripping onto those 2 baby clothes, staining them inch by inch a vivid, desperate red. Dominic seemed to suddenly come back to himself. He stared blankly at the 2 pieces of clothing, his voice dry and stiff. The clothes are dirty. The clothes are dirty. He panicked, trying to wipe them, but the fresh blood on his wrist dripped onto the clothes. He froze, trembling helplessly, and looked up at me with despair and sorrow. Anna, the clothes I gave the baby are dirty. What am I going to do? I looked at him, my heart clenched as if gripped by a giant hand, aching so deeply I could barely breathe. I closed my eyes. Dominic, you don't deserve to die, nor to be with us. You must live forever in endless pain. The room was deathly silent. Dominic was so still that not even his breathing could be heard. I don't know how long passed before he whispered, voice breaking, okay. Hearing that okay felt like some invisible chain had been lifted, and my soul suddenly grew lighter. In the last flicker of consciousness, I thought I saw Dominic dialing 120. He gave me one final, lingering look. I've transferred all the company shares to Jason. I'll donate the rest of the money to the orphanage. Anna, I will have nothing left, and I will live on, long and long, spending my life in atonement. At last, I closed my eyes, preparing to enter a new world. I hope, in the next life, may I have parents who cherish me, a husband who loves and respects me, and a few beautiful, dear children. But please, never let me cross paths with Dominic again.